They have invented a kinship between God and the jinn, while the jinn themselves know they will be assembled and held accountable. I mean, that is the opening strike from Surah As-Saaffat, Surah 37. And it's just this direct, unapologetic attack on the completely absurd architectures we build to explain away the universe.
Oh, it's the ultimate takedown.
Yeah.
It's a takedown of, well, intellectual surrender, really. What we're looking at here is this foundational critique of how human beings, I mean, across all eras, project their own social dynamics onto the cosmos.
Right.
Their own family structures, their tribal politics. They just paste it right onto the mechanics of the universe itself.
Yeah, and I want to stop you right there because if you're listening to this deep dive, you might be thinking, well, okay, we are talking about ancient religious texts, God, jinn. This sounds like, a theological debate about invisible spirits.
Yeah, theology.
Right, but that is the exact opposite of what we're actually doing today. To understand this, we really have to look at the work of Allama Parvez. And just for some quick context, Parvez was a 20th century scholar who looked at these ancient Quranic texts not as like magical spell books or mystical poetry, but as rigorous socioeconomic blueprints.
Absolutely. He completely strips away that whole supernatural veneer.
Exactly. So when the text talks about jinn, Parvez demands that we immediately discard the imagery of ghosts or goblins or, I don't know, magical spirits in lamps granting wishes.
Right, because all that imagery is just the baggage of centuries of mythologizing. Parvez goes straight to the linguistic root of the Arabic word jinn, which is J-N-E-N-N-N, and that root fundamentally means something that is hidden, obscured, or unseen.
Okay.
It's not about magic at all. It's about visibility. We were talking about pure energy, destructive natural phenomena, forces of the cosmos, or even like complex socioeconomic currents.
Unseen forces, essentially.
Yes. Forces that, especially in the primitive human experience, were terrifying precisely because they were beyond the grasp of the five senses, right? Until the exact moment they manifested and just, well, caused total destruction.
But hold on, I mean, isn't translating jinn as thermodynamic energy or unseen natural forces a bit of a modern stretch? I mean, for a text that originated in the 7th century?
Right.
Because I'm an ancient farmer, right? And a sudden flood wipes out my entire crop. Calling it a river god or a water jinn just gives me the illusion of control, right? It's a primitive psychological survival mechanism. So why is Parvez treating this basic human coping mechanism as some grand, insidious intellectual surrender?
Well, that's the crucial question.
Yeah.
It absolutely starts as a psychological coping mechanism. Think about the sheer terror of a primordial thunderstorm, right?
Right.
Or an earthquake, or a plague.
Yeah, it would be terrifying.
You can't see the atmospheric pressure dropping. You can't see the tectonic plates shifting beneath your feet. You certainly can't see microscopic pathogens spreading through a community.
You just experience the devastating result.
Exactly. When human beings encounter immense unseen power that they aren't equipped to reason through yet, they personify it. They turn a thermodynamic process into a being, with a personality, a temper, a pedigree.
Right.
But Parvez's point is that this innocent coping mechanism very quickly gets hijacked. It calcifies into a literal system of control.
Right, because the text zeroes in on a very specific act of invention here. It says they invent a kinship, like a bloodline.
Yes.
They look at the overarching rational order of the universe, the ultimate system of cause and effect, which the text refers to as God, and they claim, these destructive unseen forces, these jinn, they must be related to the boss, they must be part of the divine family.
Exactly. And that is exactly where the psychological coping mechanism becomes a massive socioeconomic trap.
Yep.
I mean, if the storm is just a thermodynamic inevitability, what do you have to do?
You have to build a better roof.
Right. You have to figure out how to build a stronger shelter. You have to use your intellect, observe the weather patterns, understand basic physics, and adapt.
Which is hard work.
It requires labor. It requires trial, error, and intellectual agency. But if the storm is this temperamental entity with a kinship to the supreme authority, well, then you don't need to study physics. You just need to bribe it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can flatter it. You can offer it a sacrifice.
So if I'm understanding this right, by giving the unseen force a personality and a royal pedigree, you just bypass the hard work of reasoning entirely.
Yes.
You are effectively outsourcing your intellectual agency to a myth.
Precisely. You surrender your capacity to reason. And this keeps humanity locked in what anthropologists call the age of worship, or the age of magic. In this state, a civilization is perpetually subjugated to fear. You're at the mercy of forces you genuinely believe are fundamentally irrational and capricious.
And here is where the trap really snaps shut, right? Because when an entire population operates under the belief that the forces shaping their lives are magical and temperamental, they become incredibly ripe for exploitation.
Oh, absolutely.
By a very specific type of opportunist. The birth of the priesthood, really. The birth of the elite intermediary.
Yes. Once the general population is sufficiently terrified of these unseen forces, a specific class of people steps up. They realize there is a tremendous amount of power and profit to be made from that terror.
Of course.
So they step up to the terrified farmers and say, hey, you know these terrifying unseen forces that govern your crops, your health, your economy? Well, they're very complex, very dangerous. You couldn't possibly understand them.
But luckily for you.
Exactly. But luckily for you, we know the secret passwords. We have a direct line to the divine family. So for a small fee, a tithe, a tax, a subservient pledge of your political loyalty, we will manage these forces for you.
I mean, it's the ultimate protection racket. It's a mafia dynamic, but played out on a cosmic scale.
It really is. But notice, this racket only works if the population is already bought into the myth. They have to believe that the universe is governed by nepotism and magic, rather than rational, observable laws.
Right, because if the population understood that these unseen forces, whether they're tectonic plates or, macroeconomic inflation, are ultimately bound by an assembled rational order, the elites would lose all their leverage.
They'd be out of a job.
Which gives massive weight to the second half of that opening quote, right? While the jinn themselves know they will be assembled and held accountable.
Yes.
That is Parwez pointing out the supreme irony here. The very forces humanity is terrified of, the forces they are trying to bribe and appease through these corrupt elites, are themselves entirely subject to the objective laws of the universe.
Exactly. Gravity doesn't care if you pray to it.
No.
Electricity doesn't care if you chant a mantra over it. The rules of economics do not care about your rituals. They are all just cogs in the ultimate rational machinery.
And, this isn't just an ancient problem. I mean, if you're listening to this deep dive, you might be thinking, sure, ancient people threw crops into a volcano to appease the weather gods, but we're smarter than that now. We have science.
Right, we have the internet.
Exactly. But do we really, think about the last time there was a massive supply chain breakdown or a sudden spike in inflation. Do we treat those as rational, man-made systems that can be analyzed and fixed, or do we mythologize them?
Oh, we absolutely mythologize them. We just updated the vocabulary. We don't call them jinn anymore.
Right.
We call them market forces, or the algorithm, or the invisible hand. The modern financial elite operates just like the ancient priesthood. They step up to the podium during an economic crisis, and they speak about the economy as if it's an uncontrollable weather pattern.
Yeah, you hear phrases like, the market was angry today, or the economy is acting aggressively.
It's the exact same personification. They personify the system to obscure the fact that these are human-designed structures functioning exactly as they were engineered to function.
Yeah.
They tell the public, look, the algorithm is too complex for you to understand. The macroeconomic derivatives market is an unseen force. It's a modern jinn. Do not try to reason through it. Just hand us your capital, give us the regulatory bailouts, and we will perform the necessary rituals on Wall Street to appease the forces.
And as long as we believe the myth that the economy is a magical, temperamental entity that only the billionaire class knows how to soothe, we don't demand structural change.
We just hope their magic works.
Exactly. It's a brilliant, insidious way to legitimize the illegitimate. But that brings up a massive logical problem, I think, because if the elites are running this protection racket, claiming they can control the system, what happens when things inevitably go wrong?
Right, the math always catches up.
Yeah. If the shaman promises rain and there's a drought, or if the CEO promises stability and the bank collapses, how do they maintain their power? I mean, why doesn't the system just collapse immediately when myth fails?
Well, this is exactly where the text moves into its most razor-sharp socioeconomic analysis. The text highlights a specific mathematical hypocrisy in the way these myths are constructed.
Okay.
It points out that the elites don't just invent a kinship. They invent a hierarchy within that kinship that perfectly mirrors their own greed. They practice what Parwez calls the asymmetry of attribution.
The asymmetry of attribution. Let's break down exactly how this mechanism works because it's fascinating. The text mocks the elites by pointing out that they attribute daughters to the overarching system, to God, while claiming sons for themselves.
Yes.
Now, we really have to pause here and make this crystal clear so you don't get lost listening to this. Parwez is adamant that this is absolutely not a theological debate about gender.
Not at all.
The text is not endorsing a preference for sons over daughters, nor is it making a biological claim about the universe.
No. The text is holding a mirror up to the cultural and economic valuation system of the elites themselves. You have to understand the balance sheet of ancient patriarchal Arabia, right?
Mhm.
In that specific historical and cultural context, sons were the ultimate asset.
Right.
Sons represented military power, economic continuity, inheritance, cheap labor, social dominance.
Mm.
Daughters, unfortunately, in that deeply flawed setup, were viewed as a liability. They were a vulnerability, an economic burden, basically a subordinate category.
So what the text is exposing here is the sheer audacity of their accounting tricks.
Yes.
When the elites construct their cosmology, they look at their own ledger. They take the assets, the prize categories, the power, the successes, the sons, and they hoard those for themselves.
Yep.
But when it comes to the liabilities, the subordinate categories, the failures, the daughters, they offload those onto the divine system. They blame the universe.
It is the ultimate evasion of responsibility.
Yeah.
And this formula, the system gets the burden, the elite gets the asset, it's the operating system of almost every power structure in human history.
Oh, without a doubt. Let's look at how this exact asymmetry plays out in modern corporate capitalism, because it is literally the defining characteristic of our era. We call it privatizing profits and socializing losses.
Exactly.
It is the exact same dynamic of keeping the sons and attributing the daughters to the system. Think about the mechanics of the 2008 financial crash, or honestly, any major corporate bailout.
Right.
You have massive financial institutions designing incredibly complex, reckless instruments, collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps.
These are the modern unseen forces.
Yes, and for years, these instruments generate record-breaking profits. And during those boom years, who claims the credit? The executives, the board.
Oh, they love taking the credit.
They stand up at shareholder meetings and say, look at our brilliance, look at our superior management strategies. We are geniuses of the free market. Those are the sons. They claim the prized category as their own exclusive creation. Their success is attributed to their inherent superiority.
But then, the mathematical reality of those toxic assets catches up.
Yeah.
The system breaks. The market crashes. Millions of people lose their homes.
Yeah.
Do those same executives stand up and claim ownership of that failure? Do they say, hey, our greed and terrible math caused this?
Never, never. Suddenly, they change their vocabulary entirely. Suddenly, it's a systemic collapse. It's unforeseeable market turbulence. It's a once-in-a-century financial storm.
Right.
They take the massive liability, the daughters in the ancient metaphor, and they offload it onto the broader system. And who pays for it? The public.
Yep.
The taxpayers are forced to absorb the shock of their greed through bailouts, while the elites retreat to their gated communities with the bonuses they secured during the boom.
And it happens in governance, too. It's not just finance. A politician will take deeply personal credit for GDP growth during a global economic boom cycle, right?
Right.
My policies created these jobs. He's claiming the sons.
Right.
But when infrastructure collapses, because that same politician cut maintenance funding for a decade, what does he say? He blames demographic shifts, or global supply chain headwinds, or bureaucratic friction.
He blames the gin.
He blames the gin. He offloads the daughters. It's staggering when you strip away the jargon.
Yeah.
They're essentially saying everything good is a result of my inherent superiority. Everything bad is the fault of the structural universe.
And the text is mocking them because their myth-making reveals their fundamental cowardice. They want the authority of being aligned with the universe, but they absolutely refuse the accountability that comes with it.
Precisely. But, this assumes that the rational order of the universe, the actual system of cause and effect, can be tricked by accounting tricks.
Right.
It assumes that if you just invent a compelling enough myth, if you run a good enough PR campaign attributing the failures to the cosmos, the consequences will magically disappear.
Which raises the ultimate question, doesn't it? If the elites are rigging the system this successfully, if they are hoarding all the assets and socializing all the liabilities through these complex myths, why doesn't humanity just live in a permanent state of subjugation? I mean, how does the natural order actually respond to this trickery?
Well, the text answers this by pointing out that the natural order doesn't write a stern op-ed. It doesn't ask for a debate. It executes.
It executes.
But to prove this, the text doesn't just give us abstract theory. It provides extensive, concrete case studies. It walks us through the histories of 4 specific figures: Noah, Ibrahim, Ilyas, and Yunus.
Now, normally when people hear those names, they think of Sunday school. They think of magical bedtime stories. You know, a guy with a boat full of animals, a guy surviving a magical fire, a guy calling down fire from the sky, and a guy living inside a giant fish.
And that is exactly how the mythmakers want you to read those stories. If you read them as magical anomalies, they have no bearing on your real life.
Right, they're just neat stories.
Exactly. But Parwez looks at these four figures as deep socioeconomic case studies. They are the ultimate whistleblowers. They are the individuals who realized the elites were claiming the sons and offloading the daughters, and they decided to step completely outside the myth and align themselves with the rational system.
Let's look at the mechanics of what actually happened with Noah, because this completely blew my mind when I first read it. What is the socioeconomic reality of the Noah narrative?
So, the society Noah lived in was built on an entirely unsustainable model. It was a civilization that had maxed out its extractive capacity. Whether that was environmental degradation or, say, a slave economy that had pushed its underclass to the breaking point,
Right.
the exact nature of the exploitation doesn't matter as much as the mathematical reality. The society was structurally doomed,
The ledger was wildly unbalanced.
extremely unbalanced, and the elites of Noah's time were doing what elites always do. They were using myths to justify their extraction. They were telling the public, the gods favor us, the economy is strong, do not worry about the cracks in the foundation.
We've heard that before.
Exactly. Noah was simply the rational mind who looked at the data. He looked at the actual laws of cause and effect and said, this mathematical formula ends in a flood. The flood is the ultimate metaphor for absolute systemic collapse.
And how did the elites respond to his warning? Did they engage with his data? Did they sit down and review his charts?
No, they mocked him. The text specifically highlights their mockery. Because when you are profiting from a broken system, a rational warning feels like a personal attack. They looked at Noah, who was building a resilient infrastructure, the ark, and they laughed. They said, look at this fool preparing for a disaster when the stock market is at an all-time high.
But Noah didn't try to outshout them. He didn't build a PR firm to argue with them. He just built the ark.
Because the ark wasn't magic. The ark represents rational preparation in the face of inevitable consequence. It's the building of a parallel system, a lifeboat, built strictly according to the laws of physics and survival.
Right.
And when the mathematical limit of that society's exploitation was reached, when the flood actually arrived, the elite's myths could not stop the water.
You cannot PR your way out of a thermodynamic collapse.
No, you can't. Noah survived, not because a magical hand plucked him from the water, but because he aligned his actions with the rational order before the consequence arrived.
Okay, so Noah is about the mathematical inevitability of systemic collapse. What about Ibrahim? The story of Ibrahim is usually told as, a young man sneaking into a temple and smashing stone idols with an axe to prove that there's only one invisible God. It's framed as a purely theological victory.
Which completely misses the economic engine of his society. You really have to understand what the idol temple was in ancient Babylon or ancient Arabia. It was not just a place of quiet spiritual reflection.
Oh, no.
The temple was the central bank. It was the treasury. It was the absolute center of GDP.
Right. The elites had convinced the population that these carved pieces of stone, these physical manifestations of the jinn, controlled the weather, the harvest, and fertility. So if you wanted a good harvest, you had to bring your grain, your gold, your livestock to the temple and give it to the priests.
The idols were literally the mechanism by which the elites extracted wealth from the working class. The idols were the ultimate daughters they used to socialize the economic burden, while the priests kept the sons, the actual physical wealth.
Yeah.
So when Ibrahim walks into that temple and smashes the idols, he's not just committing a religious heresy, he is committing economic terrorism against the state.
He is destroying their central bank. He is proving to the public that the emperor has no clothes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By smashing the idols and leaving the axe around the neck of the biggest one, he exposes the mechanical failure of the myth. He says, look, your gods cannot even defend themselves from a teenager with a piece of wood. How can they possibly protect your crops? Why are you paying them taxes?
He crashes their market,
Uh-huh.
and the elite's reaction is immediate and violent. They don't try to debate him on theology. They try to throw him in a fire.
Right, because the fire is the socioeconomic backlash. Whenever you threaten the core extractive engine of a corrupt elite, their response is to destroy the whistleblower. They try to burn him out of the economy, out of society.
Cancel him, basically.
Exactly. But Ibrahim survives. And again, Parwez argues this isn't about magical fireproofing. It's about the resilience of someone who operates purely on truth. When you expose the lie, the elite's power evaporates, because their power was entirely reliant on the public's belief in the myth.
Wow.
Once the myth is shattered, the fire of their wrath loses its fuel.
It's brilliant. So let's look at the third case study, Ilias, or Elijah in the biblical tradition. His story is famously centered around his conflict with the priests of Baal.
And just like with Ibrahim, we have to look at what Baal represented economically. Baal was worshipped as the god of rain, thunder, and fertility in the Canaanite pantheon.
Right.
If you control the god of rain in an agrarian society, you control the agricultural policy, you control the food supply.
The priests of Baal had a total monopoly.
They did. And the ruling class, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, used the myth of Baal to confiscate land, heavily tax the farmers, silence dissent. It was a rigged agrarian economy. Ilias comes in as the rational messenger and says, this system is corrupt. Your worship of Baal is a cover for economic tyranny.
And the famous showdown on Mount Carmel, where Ilias challenges the priests of Baal to call down fire from the sky, is essentially Ilias demanding that the elites prove their myth works in an objective, observable setting. He brings them out of the shadows of the temple and into the harsh light of scientific reproducibility.
He says, if your system works, prove it. Show us the math. And of course, the priests scream and cut themselves and perform all their elaborate rituals, and nothing happens. The myth fails in the face of reality.
Yeah.
Ilias then demonstrates the rational order, and the corrupt monopoly is broken. Ilias shows that you cannot build a sustainable society on an agricultural monopoly justified by invisible weather gods.
That brings us to the final and perhaps most psychologically complex case study, Yunus, or Jonah. Because Yunus isn't fighting an external elite in the same way. Yunus is fighting his own exhaustion.
This is such a critical inclusion in the text because it addresses the immense psychological toll of being the rational messenger.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, if you're the one pointing out that the corporate bailout is a scam or that the ecological system is collapsing and you watch the elites continue to get richer and continue to mock you.
It is deeply, profoundly exhausting.
Yes. You burn out. You want the system to collapse just so you can be proven right.
That is exactly what happened to Yunus. He was sent to Nineveh, which was this massive, corrupt economic powerhouse. He warned them that their system was mathematically doomed. But the consequences weren't arriving fast enough for Yunus.
He got impatient.
He got frustrated with the pace of the rational order. He essentially said, well, if God isn't going to punish these people right now, I'm out. I'm not playing this game anymore.
He abandoned his post. He stepped out of the rational system because he let his ego, his need for immediate vindication, override his understanding of the long-term mechanics.
And that is when he is swallowed by the whale. Now, again, set aside the literal image of a man sitting inside a fish's stomach playing cards or whatever. What is the whale a metaphor for?
It's the suffocating darkness of isolation. It is the absolute crushing pressure of realizing you've disconnected yourself from reality.
Wow, yeah.
When you abandon the rational mandate, when you give in to despair or ego, you are swallowed by the darkness of your own irrelevance. You become trapped. Yunus had to sit in that crushing, suffocating darkness and realize his error.
He had to do the inner work.
He had to realize that the universe operates on its own timeline, not his. The system's vindication is inevitable, but it doesn't owe you a rapid-fire light show just to stroke your ego. He had to recalibrate, admit his fault, and actively choose to re-enter the ranks of the rational system.
Which perfectly bridges us to the core thesis of the second half of the Surah. Because after establishing these case studies, after showing that the system inevitably crushes these myths, whether it's through the slow collapse of Noah's society, the sudden market crash of Ibrahim's idols, the breaking of Ilias's monopoly, or the psychological recalibration of Yunus, the text delivers this earth-shattering declaration.
It says, our word has already gone out to our sent servants. They are the ones who will be helped, and our army is the one that will overcome.
Now, if you are stuck in that age of magic mindset, you read that and you imagine a literal, physical army of angels with flaming swords waiting in the clouds, ready to swoop down and smite the corrupt elites on Wall Street.
Which just loops you right back into the very trap the text is trying to get you out of.
Exactly.
If you believe a magical army is coming to save you, it makes you passive. You don't organize, you don't build resilient structures, you just wait for a supernatural rescue mission.
But Parwez provides this radically different interpretation. This is not about a literal army waiting in the wings. This is the declaration of built-in vindication. The word that has already gone out is the immutable law of nature. It is the inescapable law of cause and effect.
Think about the phrasing there. Our word has already gone out. It's done.
The code is written.
The physics are established. The laws of thermodynamics are not up for debate.
I want to use a metaphor here to really nail down how this mechanism works because it's so important for modern life. Think about it like technical debt in software engineering.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Imagine a massive tech company. The executives, the elites, want to hit a quarterly profit target so they can secure their bonuses. So they demand a shiny new feature, and they force the engineering team to write sloppy, broken, deeply flawed code just to get the product out the door by Q3.
They're claiming the sons. They're taking the immediate asset, the bonus, the stock bump.
Exactly. But the engineers, the rational minds, say, guys, this code is unstable. It is going to crash the servers.
The executives mock them.
They mock them. They say, you just don't understand the fast-paced market. Now, the executives got their bonus, but that broken code is still sitting in the system. The word has already gone out.
The flawed logic has been written into the architecture.
Yes. The server crash that happens 6 months later isn't a punishment from the tech gods. It isn't a magical djinn attacking the mainframe. It is the mathematical inevitability of the bad code finally executing. The system's vindication was built into the very moment the executives made the reckless decision.
That is a perfect analogy, because it shows the profound difference between needing to win a debate against these corrupt elites and being on the side that history inevitably vindicates.
Yes.
The engineers, the messengers in the text terminology, do not need to win arguments in the executive boardroom. They don't need to outshout the PR firms.
Because the broken code is going to execute whether the executives admit it or not, the system wins through the sheer accumulation of consequence.
The ledger is always balancing itself. Every ton of carbon pumped into the atmosphere, every toxic mortgage bundled into a CDO, every piece of critical infrastructure left to rot so a politician can cut taxes for the wealthy. These are accumulations of consequence.
They add up.
The army that overcomes is not a military force. It is the inevitable, inescapable collision with reality. It is the arrival of the daughters they tried to offload.
So if this vindication is a mathematical certainty, it completely changes the posture of someone trying to enact positive, rational change in the world. Because, I mean, right now, so many of us burn ourselves out trying to convince bad faith actors that their corrupt systems are wrong. We exhaust ourselves trying to win the argument, trying to force the elites to admit their asymmetry.
We spend our lives in the boardroom arguing with the executives.
Yes, but the text is saying you're fighting the wrong battle.
Okay.
When you are aligned with the fundamental laws of reality, you do not need to shout down your opponents. The arrogance of the powerful is always temporary because it is fundamentally out of sync with the operational code of the universe.
And this brings us to the psychological application of all this theory. Because the text doesn't just explain the mechanics. It prescribes a very specific, almost counterintuitive response to the people hoarding the assets and offloading the liabilities. It addresses the messenger, the rational actor, and gives a direct instruction.
It says, turn away from them for a while and see. They will see.
At first glance, turn away sounds like a concession. It sounds like apathy. It sounds like you're being told to give up and let the bad guys win.
It does. It sounds like retreat. But Parwes provides a critical clarification here that completely flips the script. This instruction is not a retreat. It is absolutely not a withdrawal or a surrender of the public square. It is the disciplined refusal to engage with mockery as though it deserves engagement.
This is a masterclass in psychological sovereignty. You have to understand the psychology of the mocker. When an elite, or anyone defending a corrupt system, mocks a truth, it is not a sign of intellectual superiority.
No.
It is a defense mechanism. It's a performance designed to drag you into their arena.
Because if you try to frantically defend the laws of gravity to someone who profits millions of dollars from pretending gravity doesn't exist, you are validating their premise. You are treating their bad faith argument as a legitimate intellectual position.
Think about how revolutionary this instruction is for our modern attention economy. We live in a world algorithmically designed to provoke engagement through mockery and bad faith argument.
Oh, 100%.
Social media, political theater, 24-hour cable news panels, they all run on this dynamic. They want you to engage. They want you to get outraged. They want you to try to debate the troll.
Because as long as you're debating the troll, you are expending your energy on their terms. You are wasting your intellectual agency. The troll doesn't care about the truth. The troll cares about keeping you occupied.
The text is offering an intervention. Turn away from them. Cut off their oxygen. Practice disciplined detachment. It is the mindset of an engineer who knows the server's going to crash. You don't need the executive to agree with you. You know the math.
If you're listening to this right now, I want you to really think about this. Think about how much energy you've wasted in your life, in your career, or in your civic engagement trying to convince bad faith actors of something that is objectively true. Think about the frustration, the burnout, the absolute exhaustion of trying to force someone to see a reality they are paid not to see.
It's exhausting.
It is. And the text is giving you permission to step back. You do not need their validation. You do not need them to concede the point.
Because of the cold, unyielding certainty of the next phrase, they will see.
They will see. It's not a threat. It's an observation of inevitability.
It's stating that when the consequences of their myth-making, their greed, and their asymmetric attribution finally arrive at their doorstep, reality will assert itself.
The broken code will execute.
The market will crash. The ecosystem will rebel. The social fabric will tear. The daughters they tried to offload onto the system will return as undeniable physical consequences. And in that moment, no amount of PR, no amount of mythologizing, no amount of executive bonuses will shield them. They will see the mathematics of their own destruction.
So if our job isn't to perform for the ignorant, if we are supposed to turn away from the mockery, what exactly are we turning toward? What is the rational mind's job in the meantime?
We turn toward the maintenance of the system. We turn toward building the ark. We focus on building resilient structures, educating those who are actually operating in good faith, and preparing for the moment when the inevitable consequences arrive. Your job is to hold your position within the rational order.
Which leads us to the ultimate synthesis of this entire discussion, the final, overarching conclusion of the Soda. After entirely deconstructing the myths of the jinn, exposing the asymmetric greed of the elites, proving through history that the rational system always executes, and prescribing this incredible disciplined detachment, the text moves to its closing.
It ends with, "Glory to your Lord, the Lord of honor, above what they describe, and peace upon the sent messengers, and all praise belongs to the Lord of all worlds."
Now, in a traditional reading, you might just gloss over that as a standard closing prayer, a nice little bow on the end of the text. But Parway shows how this is actually a structural return to the very opening image of the Surah.
Right. The surah begins, way back in verse 1, by invoking the image of the ranks that hold, the forces that do not waver. And here, at the end, having taken us through this massive socioeconomic journey, it tells us exactly why those ranks hold.
This is the critical piece that ties everything together. The ranks do not hold by magic. The forces of reason and justice do not maintain themselves through supernatural intervention. They don't hold because invisible angels are propping them up.
They hold precisely because every messenger, every rational actor, like Noah, Ibrahim, Ilyas, and Yunus, in their own specific time, in their own specific socioeconomic context, faced the mockery, faced the immense power of the elite structures, and actively chose to remain completely inside the rational system.
They chose to hold the line. They didn't retreat into the age of magic. When things got terrifying, they didn't invent their own comforting myths. They looked at the harsh, unforgiving reality of their circumstances and chose to operate according to the laws of cause and effect.
Exactly.
Noah built the infrastructure. Ibrahim crashed the corrupt market. Ilyas broke the monopoly. Yunus conquered his own ego.
And this is the ultimate takeaway. The overarching system of the universe is rational. It is consequence-driven, the word has already gone out, but the manifestation of that justice in human society, the actual physical realization of a just, sustainable world, depends entirely on individuals choosing to hold the ranks. It depends on human participation.
It depends on you and me deliberately refusing to buy into the myths that serve the powerful.
Yeah.
We have to reject the comforting illusions that allow us to surrender our agency. We can't blame the jinn. We can't blame the algorithm. We can't just hope the billionaire class figures it out.
Because if we don't hold the ranks, the elites will continue to claim the sons and offload the daughters. They will continue to treat the world as their personal asset, while forcing the rest of humanity to absorb the liabilities. The system will eventually correct itself. History will vindicate the rational order, the server will crash. But the collateral damage in the meantime is catastrophic.
Right.
The question is not whether the system will win. The question is where you will be standing when the ledger balances. Will you be standing with the myth makers, scrambling to explain away the math? Or will you be standing in the ranks that hold?
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for this deep dive. We spent this time breaking down how ancient civilizations and modern corporate elites invent complex, supernatural myths to avoid dealing with harsh socioeconomic realities. We've seen how they use the asymmetry of attribution to hoard power and evade accountability. We know the rational system ultimately crushes these illusions through the sheer force of consequence. But knowing all of this, if the ranks of a truly rational, consequence-driven universe hold only because individuals courageously choose to remain inside the system and face reality, what are the comforting myths you need to abandon today so that you can confidently take your place in that rank?